Very good evening to all of you. When people ask me why X-ray art, I tell them that I come from a family of very accident-prone people. Every year, one or the other member of my family used to have a broken bone. Either they were in an accident or someone fell, or it used to be a road accident. So there used to be a plaster every year, and every year I was faced with a lot of X-rays in the family. I just had to go through them, had to look at the X-rays. But the real reason is actually goes back to my early childhood when I was suddenly taken ill. There was a bout of gastroenteritis. I had a very high fever. And family members had given up hope that I'd survive. But somehow I survived. And the next day I was hale and hearty. This incident I don't remember. But it's related to me by my family members who tell me every time how precious I was to them. Every time I went astray, they said, you have survived death. But the seed of my being an artist is not this incident. It happened much later, when I was about 4 or 5, when I had this sort of premonition, a feeling, a very strong and real feeling that I was going to die the next day. It's a very strange sensation for a 5-year-old or a 4-year-old to feel. I remember I was looking at everyone in my family with new eyes, and I was thinking, I'm going to see these people for the last time because tomorrow I'm not going to be there. Strangely enough, this feeling was just a feeling. I survived the next day, and I was hale and hearty and nothing happened. But the feeling remained with me, and it taught me a very important life lesson, which is about the impermanence of life. It's a very hard lesson for someone to learn at a very young age, but I got it, and I'm happy for it, because it taught me to value life and value whatever days I had ahead of me. Another very important factor in why I became an artist and why I started making sort of creative and crazy art is because I grew up next to a mental hospital. My mother used to work there, and I remember the first time this strangeness about my life dawned upon me was in class when our teacher wanted us to speak out aloud and say our addresses, and I said mine, and everyone in class started laughing because the name of this mental hospital and my address was the same. And when I said out aloud my address, everyone was laughing and saying, are you mad? Why are you staying there? But living so close to a mental hospital also taught me a very important life lesson, which was when I watched these people, some of whom were really gifted and talented people, they had seen life from a very psychological way. They had learned very harsh lessons from life just because the world did not understand them, the world did not see them as quite normal. They also taught me how to go ahead with whatever plans I had in my head, whatever I wanted to do without thinking about what those around me were thinking or doing. After having a childhood like that, which sort of pushed you into a lot of existential crisis, you develop a fine way of looking at the world, a different way of looking at the world, which is very unique. And because I had observed so many people who the world thought was crazy from such close distances, I also had a lot of observations, a lot of stories in me. Till a point came when I thought, if I don't let out these stories of mine, I'm going to burst, I'm going to sort of implode inside. And then I started writing. And as I wrote essays, I wrote poems, I wrote stuff for magazines, and some of which were also published, which gave me a lot of confidence, and I said, this is something I want to do, and I began writing. After that, journalism happened to me, and gradually I went into that direction. I did TV, and I started working in the field of journalism. Art happened to me much later in life. Thanks to my partner who's also here, she insisted that I must try my hand at painting because she somehow saw that I had this gift of expressing myself in colors which I had not really brought out into the public domain. And so, using my life experiences, I started painting. All those crazy stories that I had seen of crazy people I had met in my childhood, they became my inspiration. I started putting them to the prison of my experience and my inspiration, and started making abstract works, works which had no form, because I wanted to get beyond the form, because form was very limiting to me. Because of my experience, because of the deep insights I had had as a child, form became not so important, but what lies beyond form. What lies beyond form is emotion, and I try to capture that through my paintings. Then while I was still a painter, an abstract painter, I happened to be at an artist residency. Now, artist residencies are places where artists come together, they stay, they sit together, they eat, and they ideate, they think and learn from each other, they talk and exchange ideas. And during the course of this residency, which was incidentally called Why Not Place, it was reimagining the city as a place full of possibilities where people come from different towns, different villages, rural areas, all kinds of backgrounds. And this place becomes a place of possibilities where they can do a lot of things. Why Not Place was the name and the theme of this residency. And so here I thought I'd go back to my childhood experience of having seen so many x-rays, of having seen or felt the nearness of death, and also as a child, because I used to be so sick, I had this vision when I went to the doctor's once, and he switched on the x-ray box. I'm sure all of you have been to the doctor and see this light box which is there in his chamber, on which he clips on the x-ray, and then he switches on the light and everything is lit. Suddenly the whole human body is lit for you, and you can see very clearly your bone structure, how they meet, how the smaller bones meet the bigger bones, and how your body is made. In a way, it's telling you a very deep truth about yourself, about how you're made, how you're created, and when something goes wrong, how that can be fixed. So during this Why Not Place residency, I decided to go back to my childhood memory of the x-ray, because no one was, up until then, or at least I knew, was using x-rays as a medium to sort of say to the world what they wanted to say, or sort of show their artistic vision or put their artistic vision before people. So what I did was, because it was about the city, about life in the urban context, I thought of the urban shaman. Now, shaman, if you know, in old societies, shaman used to be the medicine man, and he was also called the witch doctor because he used to offer cures to people who came to him with different problems, issues, psychological issues, and psychosomatic issues, and sometimes financial issues. And the shaman used to give them cures for their problems. But I wanted to make not just a literal representation of the shaman. I wanted to make something that gave a psychological profile of a shaman. Shaman, for me, was a person or a being who had many parts to him. He was not just one person, he was a composite of many things. And so I made different x-rays of my own self, my own body parts, and sort of juxtaposed them with different machines that we use, especially in the urban context, the different things that we come across in our lives in negotiating and navigating the city. And so car wheel became one of the hands of the shaman because it helps you move from one place to the other. The body is also juxtaposed with a lot of things that you use in your daily life. There is also violence that you come across in the city context. And of course, there is building material with which you build your homes, your lives, and everything else. So through the urban shaman, I wanted to also highlight this aspect of urbanity where everyone who's living in the city is acting like a shaman because he is also his own cure, he is also his own doctor. Because the problems that you come across in the city are so varied and so simultaneous that you cannot distinguish, and sometimes you have to self-medicate. And so I made this work called the Urban Shaman. Soon after this work, it was appreciated by a lot of people, and I had another opportunity to make a similar work for the Art Summit, which is called the Indian Art Fair now. So the Urban Shaman 2 became a more denser version of the Urban Shaman 1, a more schizophrenic version of our urban existence, highlighting the different ways that we use to negotiate our space in the city. After that, one abiding story that I really held dear to myself was the story of Icarus. Icarus was a Greek hero who made the first flight ever because he was so fascinated to reach out to the sun and just see the world from a higher perspective. He made wings and he struck together feathers and other sundry material and made wings for himself and went on top of a cliff and flew from there, and he jumped to his death. So the Icarus legend is actually a very tragic legend because Icarus ended up in a crash. But for me, Icarus is a very heroic attempt of man to sort of go out of himself, out of his context, and see the world from a different perspective. This work is my first work that I made out of found material. When I say found material, it's actually a material which you find anywhere in a different context, at a kabari shop or at an old furniture shop. This one I got from an old furniture shop. These are two panels of windows which formed an arch. So I just wanted two because I had the image of Icarus in my mind when I was conceiving this work. And I put my x-rays behind them. Why I put this green artificial grass on it? Because I wanted to name this work Greening of Icarus. Because I wanted to change the context of the Icarus tragedy into a positive story. Icarus is not a tragedy, but Icarus is a heroic flight of man's, of the individual who tries to do something different. And ultimately, when he falls, he's claimed by the earth. How the earth claims him is by growing over him her cover of grass. This work was again inspired by another legend, an Indian legend, which is of the Mahishasura Mardini, where the goddess becomes a slayer of a demon who was there out to terrify people and make life difficult for them. But for me here, I've also tried to transpose the image of evil with the image of compassion and goodness. The Devi for me is not a slayer of evil, but is someone who out of a compassion makes moksha or salvation possible for the demon. So she's not killing him in anger or fury, she's just making it possible for him to go to another realm, change his habits and become another person. This work is a favorite work of mine. I call it the Black Tide. And it is inspired by Australia. If you look carefully, you'll see two surfboards in it because Australians have this habit of surfing. They are very familiar. They're very fond of water sports. They go out because there's plenty of sun, plenty of sand, and a long coastline. So they do a lot of water sports. But at the same time, Australia has had a long history of racial prejudice against the Aborigines, who are the original inhabitants of Australia. So when the white settlers came in, they subjugated the Aborigines and they made them slaves for till very recently. The Aborigines were counted as flora and fauna. They were not counted as humans also. But this I did for a show called Racism and Reconciliation. This happened after my Australia visit. The interesting thing is when an artist travels abroad, he's looking at the things which other people are looking, but he's also looking deeper into the culture, into the cultural context of a particular place that he visits. He finds stories that others don't because I guess he has a deeper proboscis. When I say proboscis, he has a deeper penetrating mechanism from which he sort of extracts stories and then he makes those stories his own and further elaborates upon them using his art as a tool. So through the Black Tide, I wanted to show Australia's history of racial abuse, especially against its Aborigine people. This work is presently showing in Venice at the Architecture Biennale, and again, it's much appreciated because it brings together not just two cultural contexts, it brings together the thinking of the East and the West, and how one new culture and one indigenous culture come. So I was talking about Black Tide and suddenly there was a blackout. So this work, as I was saying, is currently showing in Venice at the Architecture Biennale, and it's being much appreciated because it brings together two different cultural contexts, two different civilizational thinkings, and also the old and the new, the clash of the old and the new when cultures which have deep roots clash through war or through business or through any other context. This is another slide of the same work. This is a close-up of black tide. In black tide, I've used X-rays of the human skull and sandwiched them between two transparent sheets. And I've used a material which really looks like water because I wanted to bring that surf bit into this work. And to that, I've added some plastic sheets which are made of this refuse plastic material. The ropes are made in a village close to where I live. And they use this rope to make the palang, the khatiya, and it looks very nice. So when I saw a khatiya of this material, I was really interested in the material and wanted to incorporate it in my work. This is another view of black tide. This work I made after black tide, and again here I've used skulls and hands. It's not very clear in this picture, but this is actually a throne. It has a place where one can sit on, and the front portion, and that is the backrest. And this work is called The Throne Has Its Logic. I made this work when I was working in Parliament, TV, Lok Sabha, and I was very close to the centers of power. I was seeing power at very close quarters. And I was also realizing that power is a double-edged sword. It can be used for both good and for evil, and it depends largely on the wisdom of the person who's wielding that power, how this power is eventually used for good or for bad. And with this thinking, I made this work. And it's also inspired by the peacock throne, which is a legendary throne of Delhi, which few have seen, and there are fewer illustrations of this throne. And so whatever anyone knows is pure imagination. So this is my imagination of the Takhte Taus, or the peacock throne. This work I made after my son was born, so we were constantly, a big highlight of our life became the feeding bottle. But I wanted to, again, recontextualize the feeding bottle, not as it is usually viewed. I call this work Kali. The image of Kali that we have in our minds is of a tongue hanging down, and of a vengeful and angry goddess who's out to punish people or punish evil. But in my worldview, Kali has changed. She has become this nurturing goddess who is represented by a bottle. She nurtures people through her wisdom and shows them the path of salvation, which incidentally is also the tantric way of Kali, the philosophy behind Kali. This is my latest work. It's called Trapped in Air, and it's inspired by the jali work. Stone jalis were excessively used in Rajput architecture, and then later in Mughal architecture, and also in the British architecture. They used these extensive stone jalis to create spaces, or later to have a light effect. When the light falls on the jali, it creates a pattern on the floor, which looks amazing. But the original purpose of the jali, as I saw it, was something that separated from the women's section, or the zanana, from the men's section. It became a tool of suppression of women, because women remained trapped inside these jalis of stone. They did not have a way of coming out and doing what they wanted. It was used as mental subjugation as well as a physical subjugation, which it really was. So in this work, I have used I have used plastic, which is red in color, which really stands for the bloody intent of the jali. And I put the X-rays of different body parts behind the jalis. And the jalis hang. This is a close-up of the jali. And the jalis hang between two poles, which are covered in the kalawa thread, the red thread that we tie on our wrists. Again, trying to make a visual statement of the status of women in our society. It's a question which has been there in the past and continues to haunt our society, as the treatment of women is not very good. It remains as it was several centuries behind. With this, I come to the end of my lecture, and I hope I've been able to tell you about my X-ray vision, why I use it, how I use it, and more importantly, what kind of a world I would like to create through my works. A deeper world, a deeper understanding of issues, because I believe the artist's work is not just to make pretty pictures. An artist's work is also to open up the universe a bit more for whoever looks at his work. And how he does it is by creating understanding or taking viewers to places where they have not been, challenging their notions of what is, what should be, and what isn't. Thank you.